is WOC Reader, and welcome back to my channel. This is a discussion that I've been meaning to have for some time now. I had filmed a couple of videos like back last September where I wanted to talk about it, and then I ended up scrapping it. And recently I've been seeing kind of like a lot of the backlash against Blood at the Root from the book community, and I felt, okay, now it's time for this discussion. And it's really about how we treat books with black men and black boys in them, and how they're held to these higher expectations than other men, and especially white ones. So I was thinking about it because I'm seeing so much backlash with Blood at the Root. People are saying, oh, the book is misogynistic, oh, the book is homophobic, the book is this, the book is that, and I'm like, are you even reading? And I feel like people are also pulling a lot of their examples out of context and not giving people the context in the story. And once you get the context, the scenes make sense, which is very unfair, and I just don't understand why this particular book is being held to such a high standard, especially in the YA space, because people are like comparing it to Legendborn. Legendborn had Cell threatening to rip Bree's tongue out, and people had no problem with that. But in Blood at the Root, our main character gets into an argument with his love interest after a series of just like compounding things, and he says some terrible stuff to her, but she checks him right away. But that's also a problem, and it's considered misogynistic. And I feel like there's just an added layer of there's like a lot of stuff that is very much the black experience that is getting lost in translation by others, or people who particularly maybe aren't as connected roots. Like if you're not from a family who uses that kind of language, it might seem off to you. And first of all, we need to talk about how there's just a lack of books for boys in general in the kid lit and the YA space. That is something that I've been noticing for the past few years, and something I'm trying to be mindful of because I have a nephew. So when I see books with black boys, I try to pick them up for him so he can read them and he can see himself on page. That's something that's very important to me, that the children in my family can see themselves reflected on page. And I know it's been a problem where a lot of boys typically, once they reach out of the middle grade age, they just jump immediately to adult because there's not much in the YA space for them. I was speaking to an educator last year. She had put something on Twitter just asking for recommendations for her students, like who were boys, and a lot of people were just like almost dismissing her, like, well, they can just read the book written by the girls for the girls. And she's like, yes, they can read them, and they do, but that doesn't compare to being able to see yourself on page and see your experiences reflected. And they need those books with these strong boy characters as well as the main character that they can identify with. And oftentimes with the books with the girls, we're seeing an idealized version of boys that's unfamiliar to the types of boys that we actually meet in real life. Like, and I find it especially when I'm reading like contemporary black YA, the boys have to be perfect. Like, these boys have to not have too much swag, not be too loud, be good at sports but not too good, be very quiet and reserved compared to the female main character. They have to be a virgin, they have to be in therapy for years. And I'm just like, why am I only seeing one type of boy over and over again in these books, and he doesn't have too much personality? And it just, like, I feel like the authors think they're doing something, like bucking stereotypes, but at the same time, you're just playing into this idea that black boys are big and scary, so we can only feature them one type of way as to appease white readers. And I don't like that either, because I'm like, these boys are not the type of boys that I knew in high school and college, and that's okay, like, because the same way girls are allowed to be different types of ways, so are boys. And I think too, a lot of people, when they're reading Blood at the Root, they don't understand how teen boys realistically talk and how black boys talk. So, like, I saw somebody nitpicking recently, like, there's a scene in the book where they're at a party and he sees some girls twerking and he's, like, oogling them. All boys do that. Have you been to a college party? All guys do that. Have you sat and talked to guys that age? They all, like, talk about women. I think we're just not used to seeing that on page and seeing their actual thoughts. Like, they're not waxing poetic like a lot of these YA books will have you believe. And like I don't get what the problem is or how it makes it misogynistic to just feature boys being real. That's not to say like they're completely perfect or everything they say is right. But my thing is that we shouldn't be expecting them to be completely perfect, especially when they're in an age where they're still developing and maturing and they're trying to figure out the world as well. The same way we talk about how girls need to be able to make mistakes, these books we need to also talk about the boys. But also, like, we're reading YA books with white boys where they've threatened to kill the girl, like, they've choked the girl, they've done egregious things, they've said stuff that was horrible, and people like squeal all over it. They're like, oh my gosh, it's so spicy. Oh, enemies to lovers. Oh, knife at the throat. And I'm just like, but when we see it, when it's boys of other races, especially black boys, it becomes a problem. And we're not even going to those extremes. Like, nope, like he didn't threaten to kill her. He didn't threaten to rip her tongue out. So I'm like, what's the problem here? And again, I think part of it with Blood at the Root is just not understanding these cultural nuances. There's an uncle character in the story that everybody keeps complaining about because he's loud, he's brash, he says non-politically correct things. We live in a world that's not politically correct all the time. And it's kind of hard for me now when I'm reading a lot of books because I feel like people are so afraid of like getting canceled that they feel like they always need to say the right things on page. All their characters need to always say the right things on page. And that's just not realistic. Like, for example, like I know many times it's happened in the past 2 years where I've read a book where it was email book, female main character or side character kind of insinuated that another woman was like a slut or a whore or something, and it was followed up by a paragraph explaining she doesn't actually hate sex workers are amazing, she's not saying anything. And I'm like, but you're contradicting yourself because you just had her insinuate that this person was like sluttish. And it's unrealistic to act like people don't actually think like that in the real world. Like, people don't have specific standards that they're comparing people to. Like, women don't get slut shamed by other women. I was reading a fantasy book where like one of the side characters was upset because one of the men he talked about going to a brothel, and again it was immediately followed up by an explanation that sex workers were cool, blah blah blah. And I'm like, first of all, this is a fantasy world that is war torn. We actually don't know what the conditions in this world are for sex workers. Like, we don't know if it's a safe environment. And we knowing in real life, we know a lot of times in that situation women are kind of forced into that, oh, like they either don't have any other option or they're literally taken against their will and placed in these roles. So like, it was weird seeing a character express disgust for this man visiting these brothels, but at the same time the author wanted to assure us that, oh, sex workers are amazing, I don't have any problem with them, blah blah blah. There was a disconnect here, for me at least, because we did not know if it was a they are there by choice or they are there by force, or it's actually what these women want to do, because there are a lot of women in that space who don't want to be in that space and are happy to get out. Even Cardi B, who was a stripper, has talked about how she hated how degrading it was at times. She didn't love being a stripper and she was happy to get out and find it out through music. So I think we need to stop like just looking at everything in terms of black and white and try to see the nuances in between. With this character, Uncle Eddie, he he's like very brash. A lot of people are upset because he tells the main character he needs to enjoy college and get some coochie. So I'm from a black family, obviously. We all have that one uncle type character that is just out of pocket and they say a lot of wild things, and you don't even correct them anymore because you know there's no purpose in correcting them. Like I have an uncle like that, and again, it's a waste of time correcting him all the time on certain things he says, unless it's like really super offensive, then like we will like at it with him, but most of the time we just leave him to his wild comments and are just happy that he's not black women's problem. Like, so I don't get why people are so upset unless you're not around your family, therefore you've never experienced a character like that. Again, it just feels weird to not have those types of people. I'm not saying I agree with his outlook. He's saying like it felt stupid to call the book misogynistic because this character said that. That's very realistic. We shouldn't act like boys don't talk about sex, especially since there's been a push in the past few years with these books to have girls have more open conversations about sex, for girls to talk about their pleasure. I've read a lot more books where like the girls were more experienced and stuff and talking about their likes and dislikes. And I feel like, okay, so if we're going to do that and we're going to have these girls portray like this girl, we need to also be realistic and have the guys that are like that as well, because why do all the guys have to be shy, quiet virgins who are letting the girls take the lead all the time? That doesn't always exist. Like there are boys who are more like taking the lead in the relationship, especially like I don't feel like we see a lot of like first time relationships as much anymore, at least not in the books that I've been picking up that are kind of popular. We're seeing more like the girls already kind of know what they're doing. And I'm like wondering too what kind of messaging that shows for teens, because I feel like they need to see all levels. In addition to the backlash against Blood the Rude, I was also seeing like the same sentiments said about Rage of Dragons and Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I haven't read Rage of Dragons or Black Leopard Red Wolf yet, so I don't know what the context is. I just found it similar that I saw like accusations being thrown at those books as well about being misogynistic and this and that, but I don't really see people say that about white fantasy books, and I'm like, so do the white fantasy books not have anything problematic in them as well? And if they do, we need to address that. And I just don't feel like we're holding all these books to the same standard. And even at times, like people are coming in who are non-black readers, dropping their 2 cents, or black readers who really haven't been around like a lot of other black people. So they're kind of holding these books to different higher standards. Like blackness has to look a certain type of way in a book for it to be acceptable, and I really don't like that. And it feels almost backwards because I grew up reading black books, especially like black YA, and I feel like before, like we had scenes that we just don't have now, where like girls were able to hash it out, where we had boys being able to be comfortable in their environment, and we were able to freely use slang without having to explain pieces of the culture away to readers. And I feel like now, like the newer set of black authors is really kind of catering to those particular readers who maybe it's their first or second black book, and we're explaining more things to them, and we're making sure we're having inoffensive scenes for them. And but then when they go into these other books, like they're comparing and it just does not relate. You cannot compare Blood at the Root to Amari and the Night Brothers. Yes, Amari and the Night Brothers was written by a man, but it's a middle grade and it's a completely different environment. in that Amari is surrounded by all white people, and they're mostly rich white people, and she's like the only poor black person besides her friend who comes like later on. And so there's parts of her that she kind of has to close herself up. Like, she's a girl from the projects, but she has to speak very proper. She has to talk about certain things. And we're looking at books like Blood at the Root or Never Wraith, where they're like majority, if not completely, all black casts. So of course our characters in those books are going to interact differently. So what I'm asking is just for people to give these books grace and go in and not be so biased, and also understand just when books are not for you. Like, I read The Emperor and the Endless Palace recently. Did I love it? No. But I'm not going to trash that book because I do understand a lot of a men can see themselves in that book, even though it's something I can't relate to. And I even have friends who I finished reading and I immediately recommended it to because it's something that they were able to identify with. I have mutuals who were the reason I picked it up in the first place. They loved it and it felt very authentic to their experience. So sometimes you just need to acknowledge when the book is not for you and tap out. So that's all I wanted to say today. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. If you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye now.